Hello, everyone. Congratulations on being invited to Phase 2 of the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program, or Scbgp. CDFA is pleased to welcome you all to the grant proposal phase for 2022, and we look forward to seeing your full grant proposal. In today's webinar, there will be 5 presentations. The first will be an overview of the grant proposal process. Then we will cover the project objectives and work plan and cost sharing templates, the outcome measures template, and the budget narrative template. The final presentation will provide a brief overview of procuring goods and services using federal funds. The content of this webinar builds upon the grant proposal instructions you received with your invitation to the grant proposal phase. In this presentation, we will be discussing several aspects of the proposal process, including how to apply, the grant proposal application, the review process, grounds for disqualification, and award requirements. Grant proposals are due on Monday, February 14th at 5:00 p.m. Pacific Time. Late submissions cannot be accepted, so be sure to contact us with any questions as soon as possible, and please allow yourself an adequate amount of time to access the FAST system and complete your application. CDFA will submit recommendations to USDA in May, and we anticipate that USDA will announce and award funding in the fall of 2022. Just as with concept proposals, grant proposals must be submitted electronically using the FAST system. The FAST system has been updated with the questions and the attachments required for the grant proposal phase. If you haven't already, you will log into FAST using the same username and password you used in the concept proposal phase. In FAST, click on Active Applications to access the grant proposal questionnaire and complete your application. If you need to access or reference the feedback provided for your concept proposal, that can be found by clicking on Submitted Applications. Some reminders about the FAST system. It was designed and tested for use on a Windows PC. We recommend that you disable any pop-up blocking software while using FAST and save your work often. When completing your grant proposal, content that was provided in FAST during the concept proposal phase should be reviewed and revised if necessary. If a project is awarded funding, the project description will be published on both CDFA's and USDA's website. Therefore, it is beneficial to provide a summary that gives a snapshot of the entire project, including describing the need for the project goals and outcomes, and the plan for measuring project success. Importantly, the summary should be suitable for release to the public and understandable to the average reader. There are multiple reasons that a project budget may change from the concept proposal phase. If the final budget amount in the grant proposal varies from the original amount requested, please be sure to update the project budget in FAST, including the funds requested, local cost match, and total budget fields as appropriate. Please note that we will review the grant proposal based on the dollar amount indicated in the budget narrative if there are any discrepancies between the narrative and the amount indicated in FAST. Also, remember that substantial changes to a project budget are not appropriate, and budget amounts requested must be between $100,000 and $500,000. The grant proposal application questionnaire consists of 12 questions, including 3 required templates and 1 optional template, for a total of 100 points possible. There are 5 questions that carry over from the concept proposal, which are marked with an asterisk on this and the following slides for your reference. It is expected that responses to these questions will be updated or expanded to address any administrative and technical review committee feedback that was provided from the concept proposal review, or to reflect the fully developed grant proposal. I will briefly review each question on the next few slides. However, it is important to read the grant proposal instructions document thoroughly, as it contains more detailed information needed to complete the application. The first question is project purpose, and it is worth 10 points. For this question, be sure to address each of the following: the specific issue, problem, or needs your project will address, why it is important and timely to the specialty crop industry, and identify at least one of the 2022 Scbgp program priorities for the chosen funding category, as described in the request for concept proposals verbatim, and explain how the project addresses the priority. Question 2 is the project objectives and work plan and is worth 20 points. The project objectives and work plan is one of the grant proposal questions that will utilize a downloadable template. Within the template, you will enter the project start and end date, identify the objectives and activities of the project, and indicate who will perform each task and when each task will occur. We will go over this template and all of the grant proposal templates in separate presentations during today's webinar. Question 3 is project beneficiaries, and it is worth 10 points. In this section, address all of the following. Estimate the number of project beneficiaries. It is important that the number cited be a reasonable estimate of the number of individuals that could realistically be directly impacted by the results of the project. Estimates should be trackable, measurable, and reportable during the grant duration. Identify and quantify the project beneficiaries and describe how they will benefit, and describe how the project benefits the specialty crop industry rather than directly benefiting a single organization or individual. Question 3 is especially important for those applicants that received feedback indicating that their concept proposal has the potential to benefit the applicant. Question 4 is specialty crop enhancement and is unscored. Scbgp funds must enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops as defined by USDA. If your project has the potential to benefit non-specialty crops, describe the method that will be used to ensure that Scbgp funds will not be used toward this purpose. Common examples of projects that have the potential to benefit non-specialty crops would be projects involving farmers markets where non-specialty crops are sold, or projects involving nutrition education that will also include information on grains or protein. If cost sharing will be used to cover activities and/or costs that are unallowable under the program, describe the specific funds or contributions that will be used, including their source, and detail the activities and costs they will cover. If the project does not have the potential to enhance the competitiveness of non-specialty crops, the questionnaire will prompt you to indicate this project does not enhance the competitiveness of non-specialty crops. Question 5, prior year Scbgp projects, is a multi-part question and is also unscored. If the project you are submitting builds upon a previous Scbgp project, include the grant agreement number for the previous project or projects and the outcome from those projects. Describe how the new proposal is different from and builds upon previous work, and provide any lessons learned from the previous project or projects, including potential improvements and how they will be incorporated into the new project. If the project does not build upon a previously funded Scbgp project, the questionnaire will prompt you to indicate this project does not build upon a previously funded Scbgp project. Question 6, project sustainability, is worth 10 points. There are 2 possible responses to the question of sustainability. Generally, if the project involves a marketing campaign, nutrition education, or a training program, the response to this question should address the likelihood of the project becoming self-sustaining and not indefinitely dependent on Scbgp funds. The second response, indicating the benefit to the specialty crop industry that will continue beyond the grant duration, may be most appropriate for research projects or any other projects with a standalone outcome that will not require continued effort to benefit California specialty crops. Question 7, other support from federal or state grant programs, is unscored. Scbgp funds cannot duplicate activities funded by other federal or state grant programs. If your organization has applied for or received funding from another source, address each of the questions in this section. If the proposal has not been submitted to or funded by another federal or state grant program, the questionnaire will prompt you to indicate this program has not been submitted to or funded by another federal or state grant program. Note that if you are awarded Scbgp funding and are subsequently awarded funding by another agency, you are required to immediately notify your assigned CDFA grant analyst. Grant proposals should have the support of the specialty crop industry. Question 8, External Project Support, is worth 10 points. Here, identify at least one specific specialty crop stakeholder and explain why they believe the project is important and timely. Specialty crop stakeholders are individuals or organizations involved in the specialty crop industry. Support from the applicant, employees of the applicant, cooperating entities, contractors, or any other entity that will receive project funding should not be included. Similarly, organizations that will contribute cost share to the project should not be included under the External Project Support section, as their participation in the form of project support is apparent and addressed directly in the cost sharing summary. In addition, in the grant proposal phase, applicants have the option of attaching letters of support to the grant proposal application in FAST. Letters of support should be written on the stakeholder's official letterhead, be addressed to CDFA's Office of Grants Administration, and explain why the stakeholder supports the project. Although letters of support are not a requirement of the Scbgp, they are strongly encouraged as they demonstrate industry support for the project. Question 9 is the Outcome Measures section, and it is worth 20 points. This question also has a downloadable template that must be completed and attached to the application. Since this is the same template that was used in the concept proposal phase, the content provided should build upon the outcome measures provided with the concept proposal application and address any administrative or technical review feedback that was received. As a reminder, all chosen outcome measures and associated indicators or sub-indicators must be achievable within the grant duration. It is important to note that the outcome measures and indicators were developed by USDA and the Office of Management and Budget, and therefore they cannot be changed, altered, reworded, or amended in any way. As mentioned, the outcome measures template will be reviewed in more detail in a separate presentation. Question 10, the budget narrative, is worth 20 points and also has a downloadable template that must be completed and attached to this application. The budget narrative template requires a much more detailed description of the funds requested than was provided in the concept proposal budget template. All costs must conform with the federal cost principles and the USDA and CDFA requirements for this program. Again, the budget narrative will be reviewed in more detail in a later presentation. Question 11, cost sharing, is unscored. If your project will receive cost sharing in the form of matching funds or in-kind contributions, a cost sharing template should be completed. However, note that cost sharing is not a requirement of this program. It is not necessary to complete this template if your project does not have cost sharing. In this case, the questionnaire will prompt you to indicate this project will not utilize cost sharing. The final question, question 12, project oversight, is also unscored. For this question, attach a current resume or curriculum vitae for the project director, project manager, principal investigator, and any other collaborators who will receive a portion of the project funds. Please attach these in PDF format. As with concept proposals, grant proposals undergo both an administrative and a technical review before submission to USDA. Projects may be subject to additional questions from CDFA and/or USDA during this process. However, please note that not all projects awarded funding are subject to additional questions, and not all projects that receive additional questions will be awarded funding. Ultimately, USDA makes the final determination on projects that will be awarded funding. Here is a quick review of items that may result in the disqualification of a proposal. Incomplete proposals, including proposals with one or more unanswered questions necessary for administrative or technical review, or with missing, blank, unreadable, corrupt, or otherwise unusable attachments. proposals that include activities outside the grant duration, proposals that include additional content or documentation of any kind designed to circumvent the character limitations within the FAST system, proposals for less than the minimum award amount or more than the maximum award amount, proposals with unallowable costs or activities that are necessary to complete the project objectives, including indirect costs that exceed the limit set forth in the grant proposal instructions, and proposals in which the outcome measures and/or indicators and/or sub-indicators have been altered. Each year, CDFA develops a new Grant Management Procedures Manual with a comprehensive explanation of the grant terms and conditions. The 2022 manual has not yet been completed, but you can review the 2021 Farm Bill Manual for a more detailed explanation of the award requirements. The manual can be found by accessing the Scbgp website and clicking Recipient Resources under the Grant Resources heading in the right-hand menu, or by using this link. The next few slides will briefly cover some of the terms and conditions of applying for and receiving an award. All organizations applying for funding, including past recipients, must have a Dun & Bradstreet Data Universal Numbering System number, also known as a DUNS number. A DUNS number is a unique 9-digit identifier that verifies the existence of a business entity globally. The registration process can take several weeks, so applicants are highly encouraged to begin the registration process now if they have not done so. Please note that on April 4th, 2022, the DUNS number system will transition to the Unique Entity Identifier, or UEI, number through SAM.gov. If you already have a registration on SAM.gov, including inactive registrations, you have automatically received a UEI, which can be found on your entity record. In addition to obtaining a DUNS or UEI number, organizations must be registered in the System for Award Management, also known as SAM. A link to SAM can be found in the grant proposal instructions. Currently, a DUNS or UEI number is required in order to register in SAM. So if your organization does not have a DUNS or UEI number, this step must be completed before you can begin the registration. Successful 2022 applicants will be required to provide their organization's DUNS or UEI number and have an active SAM registration with no active exclusions before a grant agreement can be executed. It is important to note that SAM accounts must be renewed on an annual basis. If your organization receives funding and does not renew, if your organization receives funding and does not renew its SAM account, your grant agreement may be suspended until your SAM account is renewed, which could affect your ability to complete the project within the grant duration. Finally, all successful 2022 Scbgp applicants will enter into a grant agreement with CDFA and must follow the guidelines outlined in the Grant Management Procedures Manual referenced on the previous slide. For a standard Scbgp award, invoices are for reimbursement of actual expenses. Invoices must be submitted at least quarterly, but no more frequently than monthly. And invoices are required regardless of whether project costs are incurred during the invoice period. In addition, applicants awarded funding must submit progress reports on a biannual basis and final performance reports no later than 30 calendar days following the expiration date of the grant agreement or after the project is complete, whichever comes first. Applicants should also anticipate at least one site visit and one audit or desk review within the grant period. CDFA may put more stringent requirements in place for any non-compliant organizations. And please note that past performance is a factor in the awarding of future funding. And recipients must retain financial records, project records, and supporting documents until January 31st, 2029, or until any litigation related to the grant is resolved, whichever is later. Please be sure your organization has the capacity and processes in place to retain all records related to the grant award. More information about all of these requirements is available in the Grant Management Procedures Manual. Oh, this one is out of date as of today. At this time, USDA just published its 2022 request for applications and provided terms and conditions for the 2022 Scbgp. CDFA does not anticipate any major changes when the request for applications is released. However, if necessary, CDFA will attempt to prepare and make available a supplement to advise applicants of any changes to the program upon receipt of USDA's request for applications. CDFA and all proposals will be subject to the terms and conditions of USDA's request for applications and guidance documents. Note that substantial changes could potentially affect the feasibility of proposals. CDFA will conduct 3 rounds of questions and answers, or Q&A, to address general questions about the grant proposal phase. Therefore, if you have any questions after today's webinar, please email them to grants@cdfa.ca.gov. Responses to most questions received during the webinars or by email will be posted to CDFA's Scbgp website according to the schedule posted on this slide and on page 19 of the grant proposal instructions. Note that the deadline to submit questions is Monday, February 7th, 2022 by 8 a.m. Pacific time. Here are some helpful resources, including CDFA's website and email address. Our website contains links to the grant proposal instructions, supplemental documents and all required templates, and other helpful information. If you have any questions or problems accessing the FAST system while working on your grant proposal application, please contact the FAST Help Desk. As a reminder, the FAST Help Desk is staffed Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
This portion of the webinar will address the project objectives and work plan template, as well as the cost sharing template. The first part of our presentation will cover the project objectives and work plan template. The project objectives and work plan template is where you will identify the main goals that your project is seeking to accomplish. To complete the project objectives and work plan template, you will need to download the template from the FAST application or from the Scbgp website and save it to your computer. Once the project objectives and work plan template has been completed, please upload it to the grant proposal application using the Attachments tab in FAST. Please be aware that not attaching the project objectives and work plan template, attaching a blank file, or attaching an unreadable or corrupt file may result in disqualification. Also, please note that the project objectives and work plan template must be submitted as a Microsoft Word document. Please do not submit it as any other file type, such as a PDF. This is an example of what the project objectives and work plan template looks like. At the top, you will notice areas to enter the proposal identification number, or PIN, as well as the project start date and project end date. The template provides the option of listing 6 objectives. However, additional objectives may be added as necessary by copying and pasting additional fields. Alternatively, unused tables may be deleted. Please do not change the formatting of this template in any other way other than to add additional tables or lines or delete unused tables. Also, please note that it's very important the project objectives and work plan template does not exceed 5 pages once completed. At the top of the template, you will enter the 5-digit PIN that was assigned to your project in FAST. For the project start and project end dates, please estimate the date that project activities will begin and the date that project activities will end. The project start and project end dates may be changed to expand upon or shorten the length of the project from the concept proposal phase, but projects may not start before November 1st, 2022 or end after April 30th, 2025. Project objectives should identify the main goals that the project is seeking to accomplish, and all projects must provide at least one objective. An example of a project objective could be to develop a California specialty crop nutrition campaign, Cooking with Parents, aimed at encouraging children to try one new California specialty crop each month and cook with their parents. Objective activities should describe the tasks that will be necessary to accomplish each of the identified project objective or objectives by listing the activities that will be conducted. The information should be input in the table provided. If more than 6 activities will be required for any objective, additional rows may be added as needed. Please do not change the formatting of this template. Some examples of objective activities could be to develop overall campaign goals and objectives, or create an educational poster to be distributed to local schools. In the Performed By column of the table, we ask that projects identify which members of the team will be doing the work for each activity listed. Examples of those who can be included are personnel, project participants, contractors, and/or subrecipients. It is important to note that all individuals for whom Scbgp funding is requested in the budget narrative template must be responsible for at least one activity listed in the project objectives and work plan template as well. So please ensure that everyone listed in the budget narrative template is also listed in the project objectives and work plan template. It is also important to list the individuals performing the tasks by their title rather than their name, as illustrated in the example. In the timeline column of the table, please provide the estimated beginning and end dates for when each activity will be accomplished. Only include activities occurring within the grant period and indicate the date using the 3-letter month abbreviation and 4-digit numerical year, as shown in the example. Please be sure to list a month and date for each activity. Note that other formats, such as Year 1 or Summer 2023, are not acceptable. This is an example of what a completed project objectives and work plan template might look like. Please make sure that the appropriate PIN has been entered. Also check to confirm that this project start date and project end date are within the grant duration. Please double check to make sure that the objectives are properly explained and that the individuals performing tasks are listed by their title instead of their name. Also check the timeline to ensure that it reflects the 3-letter month abbreviation and 4-digit numerical year. The completed project objectives and work plan template may not exceed 5 pages and must be uploaded to the grant proposal application using the Attachments tab in FAST. It must be submitted as a Microsoft Word document. This portion of the presentation will quickly cover the cost sharing template. Only secured cost share should be included in the cost sharing template. In addition, funds from other federal or state grant programs cannot be used as matching funds or cost sharing. This can be referenced at 2 CFR Part 200.306, Section B, number 5. The cost sharing template is unscored and only required for proposals that include matching funds or in-kind contributions. Please note that having a cost share for your project is not a requirement of the Scbgp, is generally discouraged by USDA, and is not a factor in scoring criteria in either phase of the application process. Matching funds refer to dollar amounts that are committed to your project from a source other than the Scbgp. In-kind contributions refer to the estimated dollar amount or fair market values of time, property, or supplies that are donated to your project. Both matching funds and in-kind contributions may come from the applicant organization or from outside of the applicant organization. Any costs or activities described within the cost sharing template should not be listed within the budget narrative, as the budget narrative is reserved strictly for costs and activities to be paid for by the Scbgp. Cost share may be used to cover project costs that are unallowable under Scbgp. This is an example of the cost sharing template. At the top of the template, the project's PIN and the total amount of cost share committed to the project should be listed. Although the cost sharing template is unscored, it is required if your project includes matching funds or in-kind contributions. This document is broken down into 4 columns: amount, type of cost share, source, and summary of activities or costs covered with cost share. In the amount section, projects will list the dollar amount committed to them from a source other than the Scbgp or the estimated dollar value of time, property, or supplies donated to the project. Under type of cost, it will either be matching funds or in-kind contribution, as appropriate for the amount listed. Source will be the organization or individual supplying the cost share to the project. Summary of activities or costs covered with cost share will be a brief description of the activities or costs associated with the project that the cost share will cover. Depending on how many sources of cost sharing a project has, rows may be added or deleted as necessary. Because costs and activities covered by cost share are not included within the budget narrative, this template provides the opportunity to detail costs and activities necessary to complete project objectives that would otherwise be missing from the proposal. For instance, listing an individual's time that will be donated to the project may help clarify that the applicant has sufficient personnel dedicated to the project to accomplish its objectives. An example of the cost sharing template can be found in the grant proposal instructions. Note that this is just an example, so please do not copy it for your own project.
Hello, this presentation will review the outcome measures template. The same template that was used in the concept proposal phase will be used for the grant proposal phase. Therefore, since you have already completed a version of the outcome measures template for your concept proposal and should be familiar with how to complete it, we will do a quick review of the main requirements for the template and discuss making revisions and uploading the template for the grant proposal phase application. Completing the outcome measures template for the grant proposal phase will work just as it did for the concept proposal phase. Download the template from the FAST website to your computer, complete the template, and upload the finished document to the Attachments tab in FAST. Alternatively, you may use the copy of the template submitted with the concept proposal and revise the template as needed. However, keep in mind that you must upload the template in the Attachments tab for the grant proposal phase, and as before, the template must be uploaded as a Word document. Before making any revisions to the outcome measures template, we strongly encourage all applicants to review the administrative and technical feedback provided in FAST. This should provide a guide to the areas that could be improved with some revision. If you did not receive feedback specific to the outcome measures, this is a good opportunity to review the outcome measures selected and ensure that they are still appropriate and realistic for the project. In addition, new outcome measures and/or indicators and sub-indicators may be selected in the grant proposal phase. However, CDFA cannot anticipate how substantial changes will be received by the Technical Review Committee. There are a few key points to keep in mind in the revision process. All outcome measures, indicators, and/or sub-indicators selected must be achievable within the grant duration. Recipients are required to report on all outcomes, indicators, and/or sub-indicators identified. So please do not overstate outcomes or selected outcomes and indicators that cannot be reasonably achieved within the grant duration to improve the likelihood of funding. This is important to keep in mind because failure to successfully achieve outcome measures may adversely affect an applicant's ability to receive funding in the future. Also, keep in mind that all projects must select at least one outcome measure and associated indicator and/or sub-indicator. All numerical estimates provided should be reasonable. The number of outcomes or indicators selected is not a factor in the scoring criteria. And although the template does not have a page limitation, content provided should be appropriate, necessary, and responsive to the intended purpose of the template. In addition, even though this is the same template that was used in the concept proposal phase, there's still sometimes confusion regarding the information that should be provided in the description section of the outcome measures template. This is the section entitled Description of Data Collection Methods. To clarify, the content provided in the description section should pertain only to how the selected outcome measure and indicator will be measured, monitored, and reported. This section should not include information regarding how work plan objectives or other aspects of the project will be measured, monitored, or reported that are not related to the outcome measure. Remember, should a grant be awarded, recipients will be required to report on the selected outcome measures separately from the work plan objectives provided in the project objectives and work plan template. The description box in the outcome measures template should describe the plan for collecting data, monitoring, and reporting on the selected outcome measures only. In addition, each outcome measure must have a unique response for the data collection methods. Do not include responses such as see previous description or same as above if multiple outcome measures are selected. For each outcome measure, we recommend that you reread the selected outcome, indicator, and sub-indicator to confirm that the response specifically addresses the outcome measure as written without altering the meaning. And note that indicator 1.5b is the only outcome measure that asks for a percentage. Do not include a percentage for any other outcome measure, as this would be considered an amendment. And here are a few things to keep in mind regarding the following outcome measures. Remember that indicator 1.5 is mandatory for all proposals submitted under the Grown in California funding category, or for marketing and promotion projects that focus their efforts to sell, advertise, promote, market, and generate publicity, attract new customers, or raise customer awareness for specialty crops or a specialty crop venue, regardless of the funding category under which the proposal is submitted. And at least one of the sub-indicators, A, B, or C, must be selected. Also, for outcome measure 1, indicator 1.5, the specific sub-indicator selected must be expressed as either a dollar value, percentage change, or combination of volume and average price as a result of the marketing and/or promotion activities. It is necessary to measure actual sales figures resulting from marketing efforts against an established baseline to evidence an increase in sales. And for projects that don't already have a baseline of sales, one of the objectives of the project must be to determine a baseline during the grant period. Indicators should measure the adoption of the recommended practices as a result of project activities. Please note this does not mean the intention to adopt the recommended practices, but rather the outcome measure requires the number of the recommended practices actually adopted. This also applies to the number of innovations adopted. The intention to adopt a practice or innovation is not sufficient to be counted. And a beginning farmer is an individual or entity that has not operated a farm or ranch for more than 10 years and substantially participates in the operation. And a socially disadvantaged farmer is a farmer who is a member of a socially disadvantaged group. A socially disadvantaged group is a group whose members have been subject to discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, age, disability, and where applicable, sex, marital status, familial status, parental status, religion, sexual orientation, genetic information, political beliefs, reprisal, or because all or a part of an individual's income is derived from any public assistance program.
So the next presentation will review how to complete the budget narrative template. The budget narrative template provides an expanded and more detailed representation of the budget than the one that was completed for the proposed project in the concept proposal phase. Please note that for the grant proposal phase, all budget information should be provided in the budget narrative template, and no changes should be made to the concept proposal budget template than the one that was submitted in the concept proposal phase. To begin, download the template from the budget narrative section in the FAST application or from the Scbgp website and save it to your computer. There are 11 pages total in the template, but there is no minimum or maximum number of pages for your completed budget narrative. We ask that you do not change the formatting of the template except to add or delete rows in the table. Please leave it as a Word document in 12-point Arial font and 1-inch margins. Since development of the budget is an important part of the grant proposal, we would like to point out a few of the resources available for guidance in the process. First, the request for concept proposal is still a valuable reference for outlining USDA and CDFA requirements. Within the grant proposal instructions, you will find information about the federal cost principles, unallowable cost, indirect and direct cost, and travel in the requirement and limitation section, along with an example of a completed budget narrative. More detailed information on allowable and unallowable costs can be found in the allowable and unallowable cost and activity table available through a link in the grant proposal instructions and on the Scbgp website. The Procuring Goods and Services Supplement provides a guidance on the federal regulation for procurement transactions. A later presentation will cover this in more detail. For more about the federal regulations to determine allowable cost and ensure consistent treatment of cost, you can access the federal cost principles link in the grant proposal instructions. Remember that state, local, or Indian tribal governments, nonprofit, colleges, and universities are subject to the 2 CFR 200, and for-profit organizations are subject to the 49 CFR subpart 31.2. And finally, as mentioned before, if you have questions, we encourage you to participate in our question and answer process. Within the budget narrative, you'll provide a detailed breakdown and justification for all project costs. As you develop your grant proposal budget, ensure that all costs are necessary for the budget, well justified, and are clearly linked to the project objectives and activities. It should be clear why costs are requested and how they relate to activities listed in the project objective and work plan. We understand that the budget narrative is the best estimate based on current information. However, we ask that you do your homework to make sure that your estimates are reasonable and are not under or overstated. Providing a breakdown of costs per unit helps clarify how the estimated for each cost was calculated. Please do not enter any number with no breakdown or explanation. Costs should be consistent with the applicant organization's established practices, and all costs must be allowable per the federal cost principles and USDA and CDFA requirements. If your project is selected for funding, CDFA will remove all unallowable costs and activities as a condition of receiving an award, which means the budget could be decreased and the project activities could be affected. Now, let's review the template. The budget narrative is divided into 9 sections. The first 8 sections, A through H, will determine the total Scbgp funds requested. There is a program income category at the end of the budget narrative that should only be completed if the project includes activities that will generate income during the grant duration. I'll go over this category in more detail later on in the presentation. At the top of the budget narrative, enter the proposal identification number or PIN assigned to your project in FAST, and the total amount of Scbgp funds requested for your project. As mentioned, this is the sum of the budget narrative categories A through H and should match the amount listed under funds requested in FAST. Please be sure that the total amount requested is within the allowable range and rounded to the nearest dollar. Category A is for salary and wages expenses for employees working on the project. This section should include people employed by the applicant organization and whose time and effort will be covered by Scbgp funds. If people from other organizations will be paid with grant funds, those costs should be listed under contractual. In the salary and wages table provided, enter each employee's name, if known, and their title or role in the project. Note that if the name of the employee is yet not known, please enter to be determined. Next, enter the level of effort as present full-time equivalent or number of hours to be worked over the entire grant duration. And finally, the funds requested for each individual. Below the table, provide a justification for each employee listed. Briefly summarize duties and identify the project objectives that each employee will be responsible for completing. Include the objective number from the project objective and work plan template. It's important to note that every person who will be paid with grant funds must be responsible for activities in the project objective and work plan. To calculate the funds requested for salary employees, multiply their annual salary by grant duration, which is 2.5 years, then by their percent full-time equivalent. To calculate the funds requested for an hourly employee, multiply the hourly wage by the number of hours to be worked over the entire grant duration. Here's an example of a budget that includes 3 employees. Below the table, there is a justification for each employee working on the project. Note that each employee's justification must identify with project objectives from their activities that their activities will support. Category B is for fringe benefit expenses for employees working on the project. Fringe benefits include such as pay leave, health insurance, and unemployment, and is calculated as a percentage of the employee's salary or wages. This percentage should be determined in accordance with the applicant organization's established fringe benefit policy. In the table provided, enter the employee's name and their title or role in the project as it was done in the salary and wages table. Then enter the fringe benefit rates and funds requested. To calculate the funds requested for each employee, multiply their salary and wages by their fringe benefit rate. Here's an example of an employee that will receive $55,000 in salary for the work on an Scbgp project, as noted in the salary and wages category, and has a fringe benefit rate of 19%. 19% of $55,000 is $10,450, which is entered under funds requested. The same calculation should be performed for each employee listed under. Project-related travel expenses will be listed in Category C. The expenses listed here should be supported project activities for all individuals except contractual personnel. If the project has contractors that will be traveling as well, those costs should be listed under the contractual section. Costs must not exceed those established by the U.S. General Services Administration or GSA. These rates vary by location, so be sure to look up the appropriate rates using the GSA website. If selected for funding, your travel budget will be reduced to meet the more reasonable rates for the applicant organization established travel policy or GSA rates. In accordance with the California Assembly Bill 1887, state-funded and state-sponsored travel to states with discriminatory laws is prohibited. Scbgp funds cannot be used to support costs for travel to states with active discriminatory laws. The following states are subject to this prohibition: Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Iowa, Idaho, Kansas, Kentucky, Mississippi, Montana, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, and West Virginia. For each trip included in the travel table, the following information will be provided. First, the trip destination, city, and state. If the exact destination is yet not known, please indicate the destination is to be determined. However, ensure your costs are reasonable. If needed, use an approximate destination city as a base for calculating the travel costs requested, such as the last known location of a conference. This is important since the GSA rates can vary widely within the state, county, or region. Do not list a county or general area. Each type of expense for a given trip should be indicated on a separate line in the table. I'll show you an example of this in the next slide. Within the same line of each type of expense, specify the unit of measure, the number of units, the cost per unit, the number of individuals claiming the expense, and the total funds requested for the expense. Below the table, indicate the approximate travel dates for each trip and provide an explanation on how the trips will achieve the project objective and outcomes. Again, be sure to include the project objective number from the project objective and work plan template. And remember to include all trips as activities within the work plan. This example includes 4 separate trips. For trip 1, the destination is Monterey, California, and there are 3 associated expenses: mileage, hotel, and meals. On the mileage line, 360 miles are requested at a cost of 58 cents per mile. There is only one person claiming the mileage expense because both people will be traveling together in the same car. Multiplying these 3 numbers results in $211 under funds requested. The next expense is lodging. The unit of measure is nights, and the number of units requested is 3. The cost per unit for the hotel is $166 per night, which is in accordance with the GSA rates for Monterey in the month of November. 2 people will be traveling, so 2 separate hotel rooms are requested for a total lodging cost of $996. Now, the third and fourth expense requested are meals. Note that the rate of per diem is different from the first and last day of travel, where only 2 meals can be claimed versus full travel day meals, where 100% of the per diem can be claimed. Please be sure to check the GSA website for both first and last day of travel and full per diem rates, as CDFA may remove cost over the allowable GSA rate as a condition for receiving funds, which means that indicating the full rate instead of the first and last day of travel could result in the budget being decreased. For these lines in the table, the unit of measure is days, and the number of days requested is 2. The cost per unit of meals is $55.50 per day, in accordance with the GSA rates for Monterey for the first and last day of travel, and meals are requested for both people traveling, which totals to $222. The expenses are broken out in the same way for the remaining 3 trips in the example, and the total of all travel is provided at the bottom of the table. In addition, for each trip, provide a justification, the approximate dates of travel, an indication of who will be traveling, the city of region, and the destination city, and the purpose of the trip. Also, note the project objective number from the project objective and work plan template to show the project objective that each travel supports. Category D is for costs to purchase scientific research equipment required for the project. To be considered scientific research equipment, an item must cost $5,000 per item and must be used only for research or scientific activities. This includes items like specialized microscopes or other lab equipment. Scientific research equipment is non-expandable and tangible personal property with a useful life of more than 1 year. Note that all non-scientific items that cost more than $5,000 are considered general purpose equipment. Costs to purchase general purpose equipment are unallowable under the Scbgp. However, general purpose equipment needed for a project may be rented. Costs for rented equipment should be included in the budget category G, Other. In the table provided, enter the name and the manufacturer of the item, the grant year when the equipment will be purchased, and the number of funds requested. Below the table, provide a justification for each piece of scientific research equipment that includes an explanation for why the equipment is necessary for the project and how it will be used to achieve the project objective and outcomes, along with the project objective number from the project objective and work plan template. In this example, the project will require 1 piece of scientific research equipment. The name and the manufacturer of the item are provided in the table, and as required for this budget category, the item costs more than $5,000. Provided below the table is a justification describing why the equipment is needed and how it is directly linked to the project objective. Category E is for cost to purchase project supplies. Supplies include any item costing less than $5,000 per unit and are used exclusively for the objectives of the project. The supply category should not include any general office supplies such as paper, ink, or pens, as these are considered indirect costs. Those are not allowable as direct costs unless solely and specifically used for the project activities and can be directly assigned to such an activity related easily with a high degree of accuracy. All supplies must be tied to a specific project activity. In the table provided, enter the type of supply to be purchased, the cost per unit, the number of units, the grant year in which the supply will be purchased, the total funds requested for the supply. Below the table, provide a justification for each supply describing how the supply will be used to achieve the project objective and outcomes. Objective numbers should be provided from the project objective and work plan template. This is a brief example. The cost per unit for supply 1 sample containers is listed as $5 for a pack of 20, and 4 packs are required. $5 per pack times 4 packs results in $20 under funds requested. The funds requested for the rest of the supplies in the example is calculated the same way, and the total for all supplies is provided at the bottom of the table. Please note again, at the amount in the cost per unit column should not exceed $5,000. Any item with a purchase price that is equal to or exceeds $5,000 per unit should not be included here. However, note that the amount in the funds requested column may exceed $5,000 total. Below the table is a brief justification explaining why the supplies are needed and are directly linked to the project objectives. A more detailed explanation than what is provided here may be needed depending on the supplies requested. Category F is for expenses associated with purchasing goods and/or procuring services performed by an individual or organization other than the applicant in the form of procurement relationship. Project with contractual cost must provide the following: the name of each contractor, the fee structure for each contractor, and the total amount of funds requested for each contractor. Below the table, provide a justification for each contractor that describes the project activities the contractor will accomplish and identify the project objectives that the contractor will support from the project objective and work plan template. Again, it's important to note that every person, including contractors, who will be paid with grant funds must be responsible for activities in the project objective and work plan. Additional justification is required if a contractor's salary and wage or fee for professional services exceeds the General Schedule Pay Scale or GS 15 Step 10. The GS 15 Step 10 provides a guideline for contractual rates as determined by the Office of Management and Budget for your area and can be accessed using the link provided in the budget narrative template. Additional justification is also required if a contractor will utilize a flat fee structure. A later presentation on procuring goods and services will provide more detail on some of the requirements and restrictions. Also, as mentioned before, if there is also a procuring good and services using federal funds supplement, which provides more information is available on the Scbgp website. This is an example of a project with 2 contractors. The table lists the contractor's organization, specifies the fee structure that will be used for each, and indicates the total amount of funds requested. Below the table is a justification for each contractor. The justification for contractor 1 explains why a salary is access to the GS 15 Step 10 is appropriate. The justification for contractor 2 details why a flat rate fee structure is used. Keep in mind that this is a general example and ensure you provide accurate detail, thoroughly just clarifying your contractual expenses. Within the contractual budget category, in addition to the contractual table and justification, an additional breakdown of expenses is required for contractors using a salary and wage or fee for professional services fee structure. For these fee structures, a breakdown of all costs for budget categories A through H is required. Tables are provided for the first contractor and can be copied as needed for additional contractors. Please note that the breakdown of costs is not required for flat rate contractors because all associate costs, such as supplies and travel, are included in the flat rate. In the example, contractor 1 will use a salary and wage fee structure, so a breakdown of costs for category A through H is required. Contractor 2 will be using a flat rate fee structure, so a breakdown of costs for category A through H is not required because all of these costs are included in the flat rate. This is what the breakdown should look like for a contractor using a salary and wages or fee for professional services fee structure. This example only shows budget categories A, B, and C, but a breakdown should be provided for all budget categories where expenses are expected. There is one set of blank tables provided, so copy these tables for each additional contractor as needed. For a more thorough example, review the example budget narrative provided in Appendix C in the grant proposal instructions. Now, category G is where budget-related expenses not covered in any other category should be listed. Expenses listed under category G can include costs for hosting meetings, conference registration fees, rental expenses, and publishing project results in professional journals. In the table provided, enter a description of the expenses, the cost per unit, the number of units to be purchased, when the expenses will be expected, and the funds requested. For each expense listed in the table, provide a justification describing how it will be used to achieve the project objectives and outcomes. Lastly, identify the number from the project objective and work plan template for each expense listed here. Note that if the costs for meals or refreshments for meetings attendees are required or requested, a reasonable justification is needed to support that the meal is necessary and is not an entertainment cost. To be sure to provide the estimated number of attendees and the cost per meal, which cannot exceed the GSA rates for the meeting location. In this example, there are two expenses. As with the other categories in the budget narrative, multiply the cost per unit times the number of units needed to determine the amount of funds requested. The justification explains why the costs are needed and how they relate to the project objectives. And finally, category H is for indirect cost. Indirect costs are costs that cannot be identified directly with a particular program or organizational activity. These include items such as IT services, rent, utilities, and internet service, general office supplies, insurance, and maintenance. Indirect costs are calculated as a percentage of the total personnel costs. In the table provided, enter the total personnel costs, which are the sum of category A, salary and wages, plus category B, fringe benefits. The indirect cost rate, which is 8% maximum, and the funds requested. In this example, the total personnel cost is $94,860. The indirect cost rate requested is 8%. So that total indirect cost funds requested is $7,589. Note that an indirect cost amount exceeding 8% of the total personnel cost may result in the project being disqualified. Now, the program income category is where you will describe any income that your project might generate as a result of grant-supported activities during the period of the performance. An example of a source of program income would be registration fees for events hosted as a result of grant activities. Most projects will not generate any program income, and no preference is assigned either way. Program income cannot be used as profit and must be spent before the end of the grant period in compliance with restrictions on allowable and unallowable costs and activities. In the table provided include a description of the source of program income, how the project will generate program income, and how it will be used to enhance specialty crops. A detailed explanation on how the income will be reinvested into the project in support of project objectives, and the total amount of estimated program income. In this example, the applicant will generate $5,000 in program income by charging a $50 workshop registration fee. The income will be reinvested back into the project and will be used to enhance specialty crops. If your project will generate program income, an explanation of the specific activities that will be paid for with program income must be provided. When all sections of the budget narrative are completed and the final version is saved to your computer, you are ready to attach or upload the document to the grant proposal application using the attachment in the FAST. The budget narrative must be attached as a Microsoft Word document. Please do not submit a PDF file or any other file type. Given that the budget is a key part of the overall grant proposal, there is a few issues related to the budget narrative template that could result in disqualification of the grant proposal. These include forgetting to attach a budget narrative, attaching a blank file by mistake, attaching an unreadable or corrupted file, modifying the template using a previous year's version of the template, or accidentally attaching the wrong file. Requesting the total amount of Scbgp funds that is less than $100,000 or greater than $500,000. Requesting indirect costs that exceed 8% of the total personnel costs or including excessive unallowable costs. And finally, a few reminders to keep in mind as you work. Please do not include any cost sharing or references to cost sharing in the budget narrative. The budget narrative should include only costs that will be paid for with Scbgp funds. Be sure to round all costs to the nearest dollar, and please double check your math to make sure everything adds up and your totals are correct. There is a lot of detail required in the budget narrative, and we encourage you to get an early start. And again, remember that we are available to answer your questions. Questions should be submitted via email and received before the deadline of February 7th at 8 a.m.
This presentation will explain the requirements and restrictions for procuring goods and services using federal funds. For more information, applicants should reference the 2 CFR 200, also known as the Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements for Federal Awards. This is available online. This is available online by searching for 2 CFR 200. CDFA has also created a Procuring Goods and Services guidance document with additional detail available via a link under the Grant Proposal Supplement section of the Scbgp website. Applicants may contract for services that cannot be provided by staff employed by their organization. Generally, these services are for a short-term period and provide a specific and identifiable product or service. If awarded funds, applicants are responsible for ensuring their contractors and/or consultants comply with applicable federal regulations and requirements. Importantly, contracting does not change the applicant's overall responsibility for management of the project. Therefore, the applicant must reserve sufficient rights and control to enable it to fulfill its responsibilities for the project. As a minimum requirement, applicants must establish and follow a documented procurement policy. This policy must conform to applicable federal law and reflect applicable state, local, and tribal laws and regulations. Please reference 2 CFR 200, Part 318 for additional information on general procurement standards. When selecting a contractor, applicants must use one of the procurement methods outlined in the complete list found in 2 CFR 200, Part 320. The next few slides will highlight the most common procurement methods. First is procurement by micro-purchase, defined as acquisition of supplies or services at or below the micro-purchase threshold, currently $10,000. These may be done without soliciting competitive bids, so long as the applicant believes the cost to be reasonable. Next is procurement by small purchase procedures. This is a relatively simple and informal procurement method which may be used for securing services, supplies, or other property that do not cost more than the simplified acquisition threshold, currently $250,000. If small purchase procedures are used, price or rate quotations must be obtained from an adequate number of qualified sources. Note that adequate number is not defined as it depends on what makes sense for each procurement. If the procurement will be more than the simplified acquisition threshold, then a formal competitive bid process is required. For complete details of the competitive bid process, refer to 2 CFR 200, Part 320, and the Contractual Services Guidance document provided by CDFA. The last procurement method highlighted today is procurement by non-competitive proposal, which is also known as single source bidding. This practice is appropriate for only a limited set of circumstances as described in 2 CFR 200, Part 320F. If awarded funds, applicants that anticipate using this procurement method should contact their assigned CDFA grant analyst before beginning the process. For any procurement in excess of the simplified acquisition threshold, regardless of the procurement method selected, a cost or price analysis, which includes development of an estimate, is required prior to soliciting bids. There are generally 3 types of fee structures for contractual services: salaries and wages, fees for professional services, and flat rate. For salaries and wages, costs are based on the actual salary or hourly wage for anyone performing work under the contract. The distinction for this fee structure is that, in addition to actual salaries, contracts may itemize charges into budget categories for fringe benefits, supplies, travel, other costs, and indirect costs. When using the fees for professional services payment structure, an hourly rate is paid for services provided. This fee structure is common with for-profit organizations such as marketing agencies. The rate does not necessarily reflect the actual salary of the person performing the contracted work and is typically inclusive of salary, fringe benefits, and overhead costs associated with the service provided. Note that including otherwise unallowable costs within a fee for professional services is prohibited. An example of this would be indirect costs above the 8% maximum allowable. When using the flat rate fee structure, a predetermined rate is paid for services provided rather than payment based on hours worked. If selecting a flat rate contractor, the applicant must provide a justification for the flat rate fee and demonstrate that the rate is reasonable and consistent with fees in the marketplace for similar services. Again, please note that including otherwise unallowable costs within a flat rate fee is prohibited. An example of a contractor that might use a flat rate fee is one with proprietary technology or one that provides a specialized service such as designing apps. In some cases, prior approval from CDFA is required before selecting a contractor. Some common examples include selecting a contractor by non-competitive proposal or single source bidding, selecting a contractor with salaries, wages, or fees for professional services that exceed the general schedule grade 15, step 10, commonly referred to as the GS15 step 10, for the locality in which work will occur, or selecting a contractor that will utilize a flat rate fee structure. Should you be awarded funds, making changes to contractual services submitted in the grant proposal will also require prior approval. Some examples of this include selecting a contractor not already identified on the project application or scope of work, or changes in the fee structure of a previously approved contractor. For example, changing from a flat rate fee structure to a fee for professional services. In all cases, please contact the assigned CDFA grant analyst for assistance. And finally, some specific documentation is required when using contractual services. Because all applicants that are awarded funds will be audited by CDFA, it is important to maintain a copy of the organization's documented procurement policy and any records that show that the terms of the procurement policy were followed and that all costs conform to cost principles. Importantly, remember that this was just a brief overview of the procedures for using contractual services. For more information, please refer to 2 CFR 200 Parts 318 to 320 and the Contractual Services Guidance document provided by CDFA.